The sky was burning. Fire rained down from the heavens as the alien fleet unleashed destruction upon the human colony of Epsilon Prime. Explosions ripped through buildings, turning once thriving streets into rubble. Screams echoed over the emergency broadcast channels, but no help came. The colony's planetary defenses had already fallen, their defense grid hacked by the enemy's superior AI systems. It was supposed to be just another routine colony, but now it was ground zero for humanity's latest war. Sergeant Bonner wiped sweat and ash from his face as he crouched behind a collapsed transport shuttle, gripping his plasma rifle. His squad, battered and exhausted, hid in the ruins around him. The enemy was everywhere. Sleek alien drones hovered above, scanning for survivors, while towering mechanical war machines stomped through the city, crushing anything in their path. Bonner's heart pounded in his chest. They had no reinforcements, no escape. They were supposed to hold the last defense line, but now it was clear. There was no line left to hold. "Sergeant, we're out of time," one of his men, Corporal Vickers, muttered through the helmet's comms. "Command's gone dark. No response from Earth." Bonner exhaled sharply. He already knew. The enemy had jammed long-range communications, leaving them cut off. He glanced toward the sky, where massive alien warships loomed in low orbit, their energy cannons lighting up the atmosphere with each devastating blast. This wasn't just an invasion. It was annihilation. A sudden explosion nearby sent a shockwave through the ground, and Bonner instinctively ducked. The enemy was getting closer. His squad had been hiding for hours, striking in small bursts, and then vanishing before the aliens could retaliate. But they were running out of places to hide, out of ammo, out of options. Then the sky changed. The first sign was the enemy fleet's sudden hesitation. Their formations shifted. Alien scanners, always so precise, flickered with uncertainty. The massive warships that had been bombarding the surface suddenly ceased fire. Bonner frowned, exchanging a glance with Vickers. Something was happening. Something big. Above, the enemy's advanced sensor arrays began to fail. Their ships twitched, adjusting their trajectories as if reacting to an unseen threat. The enemy's eye-controlled defenses were fast, but now they were struggling against something beyond their understanding. Then, without warning, the first human warship emerged. It was massive, a Leviathan-class dreadnought, its black hull reflecting the distant sun. It appeared as if from nowhere, its cloaking field dissipating in a shimmer of light. The enemy barely had time to react before the dreadnought opened fire. Bright beams of energy lanced through the void, cutting through the nearest alien cruiser like paper. The enemy ship exploded in a fiery burst, debris scattering into the planet's atmosphere. Bonner's breath caught in his throat. They came. One by one, more human warships decloaked, revealing the hidden fleet that had been lurking just beyond sensor range. The enemy, for the first time, looked unprepared. Their formations broke as they scrambled to reposition against the sudden ambush. The battle shifted instantly. The human fleet did not hesitate. Missiles and railgun rounds tore through the alien ranks, shattering their once invincible armada. The enemy had expected an easy extermination. Instead, they found themselves under siege. On the ground, Bonner's squad watched in awe as streaks of fire rained down, not from enemy bombardment, but from human dropships. Reinforcements. A new voice crackled over Bonner's comms, cutting through the static. "All remaining ground forces, hold your position. We're coming for you." It was a voice Bonner never expected to hear again. Humanity was back in the fight. Bonner's breath misted inside his helmet as he sprinted across the shattered street, plasma rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Smoke choked the air, and the distant hum of alien drones echoed off the ruined buildings. Overhead, streaks of light carved across the sky as humanity's warships clashed with the alien fleet. Each explosion rumbled through the ground like distant thunder, but Bonner had no time to watch the battle above. His squad moved quickly through the rubble, their exosuits hissing with every step as hydraulics amplified their speed and strength. "Stay low and keep moving," Bonner barked, his voice sharp over the comms. His HUD flickered with enemy markers, too many of them. The alien drones had shifted patterns after the arrival of humanity's fleet, sweeping the city in tighter grids to hunt down survivors. The towering war machines had pulled back, focusing on defending key positions, but that didn't mean they were safe. Far from it. Vickers scrambled beside him, shouting over the comms, "Sergeant, we got to fall back. There's no way we can. We hold the line." Bonner cut him off. Panic was death. They had to think fast. His eyes darted across the battlefield, scanning for anything they could use. The war machine's armor was too thick for standard plasma rifles, but its leg joints, those were vulnerable. "Target the legs," Bonner ordered. "Focus fire on the joints. Go." The squad popped out of cover and opened fire in unison. Blue plasma bolts streaked through the air, hammering into the war machine's legs. Sparks flew as armor plates melted and buckled. The machine roared, shifting its weight to stabilize itself. Its cannons fired back, forcing the squad to dive for cover again. One of the soldiers cried out as a plasma bolt clipped his shoulder, sending him sprawling to the ground. Bonner cursed under his breath. They couldn't hold out much longer. His mind raced, searching for options. Then he spotted it, a half-buried fuel cell from a crashed transport, its casing cracked and leaking volatile plasma. It was a risk, but they had no choice. "Vickers, cover me," Bonner shouted, breaking from cover and sprinting toward the fuel cell. Plasma bolts scorched the air around him as the war machine adjusted its aim, but Bonner kept running. His exosuit's servos strained against the uneven rubble, but he pushed harder, adrenaline drowning out the burn in his muscles. He reached the fuel cell and skidded to a halt, ripping a grenade from his belt. The war machine pivoted toward him, plasma cannons charging with a high-pitched whine. Bonner yanked the grenade's pin, jammed it against the cracked casing, and bolted back toward cover. "Take it down," he roared. The squad opened fire with renewed fury, hammering the war machine's legs as Bonner dove behind a collapsed wall. The air crackled with heat as plasma bolts streaked past his head. The war machine staggered forward, optics blazing with fury, then stepped directly onto the fuel cell. The explosion tore through the street with a deafening roar. Flames engulfed the war machine's legs, and its cannons exploded in a shower of molten shrapnel. The massive machine toppled sideways, crashing into the rubble with a final, metallic groan. Smoke and fire billowed into the air as its systems failed one by one. Silence fell over the battlefield. Bonner lay still, heart pounding in his chest, ears ringing from the blast. Slowly, he pushed himself up, exosuit groaning from the strain. Smoke stung his eyes as he surveyed the wreckage. The squad emerged from cover, battered but alive. Vickers clapped Bonner on the shoulder, breathless but grinning. "Hell of a shot, Sergeant." Bonner managed a grim smile. "We're not done yet. Move out." They pressed forward, moving faster now. The distant hum of drones was fading as the alien forces fell back toward their command center. Humanity's counterattack was working, but Bonner knew the fight was far from over. Somewhere beyond the smoke and rubble, the alien AI overlord was waiting, and Bonner intended to bring the fight straight to its doorstep. Smoke clung to the air, thick and suffocating as Bonner's squad moved through the ruins of Epsilon Prime. Every step crunched against shattered concrete and broken glass, the distant echoes of battle rumbling through the city like an approaching storm. The ground beneath their boots trembled as distant explosions rocked the horizon. Somewhere overhead, streaks of light still carved through the sky as humanity's fleet clashed with the alien armada. Yet down here, amid the rubble and shadows, survival depended on silence. Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears as he led the squad through the maze of collapsed buildings. His exosuit hissed with each step, hydraulics straining to keep pace. Their cloaking devices hummed softly, bending light around their armored forms, but the heat from the recent firefight made it harder to maintain full invisibility. The alien eye wasn't omniscient, but it learned quickly. Each battle, each tactic, everything humans did was analyzed and countered within minutes. There was no room for error. 2 clicks to the spaceport, Vickers whispered over the comms. His voice crackled with static, but the determination was clear. If we keep this pace, we'll reach the dropships before they dust off. Let's hope they're still there, Bonner replied, eyes scanning the rubble-strewn street ahead. His HUD marked faint heat signatures beyond the collapsed buildings. Drones patrolling the perimeter, searching for any survivors who'd slipped through the first wave of extermination. There were fewer now. Humanity's fleet had forced the aliens to pull back their ground forces, but the AI had left enough machines behind to finish what it started. Bonner raised a fist, halting the squad as they approached the remains of an office tower. Its skeletal frame loomed above them, charred steel beams twisting into the night sky. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal. Bonner crouched low, motioning the squad into cover as his visor magnified the heat signatures ahead. 4 alien drones hovered near the base of the tower, their sleek black frames reflecting the faint glow of distant fires. Red optics swept the ruins in precise arcs, scanning for any sign of movement. Bonner signaled to Vickers and 2 others, Archer and Cole. Take the left flank. Silent takedown. I'll cover from here. Vickers nodded and vanished into the shadows, cloaking field shimmering as he moved. Archer and Cole followed, moving low through the rubble with practiced precision. Bonner steadied his breathing, plasma rifle raised, finger resting lightly on the trigger. One shot would bring the whole patrol down on them, but he trusted his squad. They'd survived this long for a reason. Vickers struck first, plasma knife slicing clean through the nearest drone's core with a burst of sparks. Before the others could react, Archer and Cole opened fire with suppressed plasma shots, each bolt punching through alien alloy with deadly accuracy. The remaining drones crumpled to the ground in seconds, their optics flickering briefly before going dark. Clear, Vickers reported, stepping back into view. Bonner lowered his rifle, exhaling slowly. Good work. Keep moving. The squad pressed on, weaving through the ruins with renewed urgency. Each step brought them closer to the spaceport, but Bonner couldn't shake the unease twisting in his gut. The alien eye wasn't just adapting, it was waiting. Every ambush, every skirmish felt like part of a larger game, as if the Overlord was herding them toward a trap. But they had no choice. If they missed the dropships, they were dead. A distant roar echoed through the city, low and mechanical, followed by the heavy thud of metal feet against concrete. Bonner froze, raising a clenched fist to halt the squad. The sound grew louder, closer, until a massive shadow emerged from the smoke-choked streets. The alien war machine loomed before them, its towering frame illuminated by the faint orange glow of distant fires. Sleek black armor gleamed beneath streaks of molten slag from earlier battles, but its cannons still burned bright with crimson energy. Multiple optics scanned the street in rapid arcs, their red glow piercing through the smoke. The machine paused, as if listening, then resumed its slow, methodical search. "Stay down," Bonner whispered, pressing himself against the rubble. His heart pounded against his ribs as he watched the war machine approach, each step shaking the ground beneath his boots. The squad held their breath, cloaking devices straining to mask their heat signatures as the alien behemoth passed within meters of their position. For a moment, Bonner thought they might make it. Then, without warning, the machine's optics flared brighter, and its cannons whined as they charged. Bonner's HUD flickered with warnings. The machine had detected something. "Scatter," he shouted, diving for cover as the war machine opened fire. Plasma bolts exploded against the rubble, sending shards of concrete and steel flying through the air. Heat washed over Bonner's armor as he rolled behind a collapsed wall, rifle clutched tightly in his hands. Vickers and Archer scrambled into the ruins on the left, while Cole and the others sprinted toward the right. The air crackled with energy as the machine's cannons tracked their movements, each shot carving fiery craters into the street. Bonner gritted his teeth against the ringing in his ears, adrenaline sharpening his focus. "Flank it," he barked over the comms. "Take out the legs," same as before. Vickers and Archer circled to the left, plasma rifles blazing as they targeted the machine's knee joints. Sparks flew as molten metal sprayed from the impact points, but the machine barely staggered. Its cannons swiveled toward Vickers' position, firing with deadly precision. Vickers dove behind a collapsed transport, heat washing over his armor as plasma bolts scorched the ground around him. Bonner popped out of cover, rifle snapping up as he fired a burst of plasma at the machine's exposed side. Blue energy splashed against its armor, leaving molten scars across the black alloy. The machine pivoted with surprising speed, cannon swiveling toward Bonner with a mechanical roar. Before it could fire, Cole launched a plasma grenade from the right flank. The explosive arced through the air, striking the machine's shoulder joint with a blinding flash of blue fire. The impact staggered the machine, molten shrapnel raining across the rubble as one of its cannons sparked and died. "Keep hitting it," Bonner shouted, charging forward as the machine stumbled. His exosuit's servos strained against the uneven rubble, but he pushed harder, adrenaline fueling every step. Plasma bolts sizzled past him as the machine's remaining cannon fired wildly, struggling to track the multiple targets. Bonner skidded to a halt beneath the machine's towering frame, rifle aimed directly at the exposed knee joint. His finger tightened on the trigger, sending a rapid burst of plasma into the vulnerable servos. Metal melted and cracked, and the machine lurched as its damaged leg buckled beneath its weight. "Vickers, now!" Bonner roared. Vickers sprang from cover, plasma knife gleaming in his hand as he vaulted onto the machine's back. Sparks flew as he drove the blade deep into the machine's central core, severing critical power conduits with practiced precision. The machine shuddered violently, optics flickering as its systems began to fail. Bonner dove clear as the machine collapsed, its massive frame crashing into the rubble with a deafening roar. Smoke and fire billowed into the air as secondary explosions rocked its damaged core, sending molten shrapnel flying in all directions. Silence fell over the battlefield once more. Bonner lay still for a moment, breath ragged inside his helmet, ears ringing from the explosions. Slowly, he pushed himself up, muscles aching from the strain. His HUD flickered with damage reports, armor integrity at 60%, shields offline. But he was still breathing. "Status," he called over the comms. "Alive," Vickers replied, limping out of the smoke with his knife still clutched in his hand. Archer and Cole followed close behind, battered but standing. Bonner nodded grimly. "Good work. Let's move before more show up." They pressed on, pushing deeper into the city as distant explosions echoed through the streets. The spaceport was close now. Bonner could see the faint glow of dropship engines against the night sky. But the alien eye wasn't finished yet. Its forces might have pulled back, but Bonner could feel it watching, waiting for its next move. And he knew the worst was still to come. The air grew heavier as Bonner's squad pressed on through the ruins of Epsilon Prime. Fires crackled in the distance, their glow reflecting off shattered windows and twisted steel. Smoke clung to the air, thick with the stench of burned metal and scorched earth. The distant rumble of artillery echoed across the city, a constant reminder that the battle above still raged. Every step through the rubble felt slower, each breath harder as exhaustion pressed down like a weight on Bonner's shoulders. But there was no time to stop. The dropships wouldn't wait. "We're close," Vickers said, his voice crackling over the comms. His breath came in ragged gasps, but his tone was steady. "The spaceport's just beyond that ridge." Bonner paused at the edge of a crumbled highway, scanning the area ahead. His HUD highlighted faint heat signatures scattered across the ruins, unmanned drones patrolling the perimeter. Their sleek black frames hovered silently above the rubble, optics glowing red as they scanned the streets below. No sign of the larger war machines, But Bonner wasn't taking any chances. "Stay low," he ordered. "Cloaks on. We go fast and silent. No engagements unless we have to." The squad nodded, activating their cloaking devices with a faint hum. Light bent around their armored forms as they vanished from sight, faint ripples the only hint of their presence. Bonner took point, weaving through the wreckage with silent precision. Each step crunched softly against broken concrete, but the sound was lost beneath the distant echoes of battle. They moved swiftly, slipping past the patrolling drones with practiced ease. Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears as adrenaline sharpened his focus, every shadow and distant flicker of movement setting his nerves on edge. The alien AI was learning fast, adapting to their cloaking technology. Bonner knew it was only a matter of time before it found a way to see through their camouflage. As they approached the ridge, Bonner signaled the squad to halt, raising a clenched fist. They crouched low, eyes scanning the shattered skyline ahead. The spaceport lay just beyond the ridge, its towering spires silhouetted against the distant fires. Dropships loomed on the landing pads, their engines glowing faintly as they prepared for liftoff. But between the squad and Salvation stretched a no-man's land of rubble-strewn streets and collapsed buildings. And scattered across the battlefield, dozens of alien drones hovered in tight formation, their optics sweeping the ruins with relentless precision. Bonner cursed under his breath. There was no way around. The only path to the spaceport was straight through the patrol zone. And with their cloaking devices struggling to maintain full invisibility after the last firefight, the odds of slipping through undetected were slim. "Options," Vickers whispered, crouching beside Bonner. Bonner's mind raced through the possibilities, each one more dangerous than the last. They could try to sneak through, but the drones were too densely packed. Someone would get spotted. A direct assault would be suicide, and waiting was out of the question. The dropships wouldn't wait for long, and reinforcements would arrive any minute. "We need a distraction," Bonner said, voice low but firm. "Something to draw the drones away long enough for us to make a break for the dropships." Vickers nodded slowly. "I've got a couple of plasma grenades. Could set off a chain reaction if we hit the right spot. Maybe collapse one of those towers and draw them in." "It's risky," Bonner replied, "but it's our best shot. Set the charges, remote detonation." Vickers slipped away into the shadows, moving with silent efficiency as he approached the nearest collapsed tower. Bonner signaled the rest of the squad to prepare, double-checking his rifle and cloaking field. His pulse hammered against his ribs, but he forced himself to focus. Failure wasn't an option. Minutes stretched into eternity as Bonner waited, every second dragging against his nerves. The distant hum of drones echoed through the air, their red optics sweeping the rubble with methodical precision. Bonner gritted his teeth, muscles coiled with tension as he waited for Vickers' signal. Finally, the comm crackled softly in his ear. "Charges set. Ready on your mark." "Do it," Bonner replied. A heartbeat of silence, then the night exploded into chaos. Plasma grenades detonated with blinding flashes of blue fire, shockwaves tearing through the ruins as the tower collapsed in a deafening roar. Chunks of steel and concrete rained down across the battlefield, sending clouds of dust billowing into the air. Alarm klaxons blared through the city as alien drones converged on the explosion, red optics blazing against the smoke-choked night. "Move," Bonner barked, sprinting forward as the squad broke from cover. Cloaking fields shimmered as they rushed through the smoke, boots pounding against the rubble-strewn streets. The air crackled with residual heat from the explosion, dust stinging Bonner's eyes as he pushed forward. Heart hammering in his chest, he vaulted over a collapsed wall and hit the ground running, muscles burning with exertion. The spaceport loomed closer with every step, its towering spires rising above the chaos. Dropships crouched on the landing pads, engines rumbling as pilots prepared for liftoff. Bonner's HUD marked the nearest vessel, a sleek, angular craft with humanity's emblem scorched across its hull. Just a few hundred meters more, and they'd be free. A sharp whine pierced the air, and Bonner's heart lurched as crimson energy streaked past his head, scorching the air with blistering heat. The drones had spotted them. "Go! Go! Go!" Bonner shouted, plasma rifle snapping up as he fired over his shoulder. Blue energy bolts streaked through the air, striking the nearest drone and sending it spinning into the rubble in a burst of molten metal. More drones swarmed toward them, plasma cannons blazing as they fired from above. Vickers and Archer returned fire, plasma bolts lighting up the night as they sprinted toward the spaceport. Cole staggered as a plasma shot grazed his shoulder, armor sizzling from the impact, but he kept running, adrenaline drowning out the pain. Bonner gritted his teeth, forcing his legs to move faster as plasma fire scorched the ground around him. The air crackled with heat, every breath searing against his throat as he pushed himself harder. The spaceport gates loomed ahead, massive steel barriers reinforced with energy shields. But the gates were closing. "Vickers, hit those controls," Bonner shouted, pointing to a control panel near the entrance. Vickers skidded to a halt, diving behind cover as plasma fire rained down around him. Fingers flying across the controls, he bypassed the alien security protocols with practiced ease. Sparks flew from the panel as he forced the gates open, energy shields flickering as they powered down. "Go!" Vickers shouted, sprinting after the squad as the gates slid open with a grinding roar. Bonner surged forward, plasma rifle blazing as he covered the squad's retreat. Drones swarmed overhead, plasma bolts streaking past him as he fired shot after shot, armor burning from near misses. His lungs burned with every breath, muscles screaming with exhaustion, but he refused to stop. Archer reached the dropship first, slamming his palm against the hatch controls. The doors hissed open, revealing the cramped interior of the troop bay. Cole stumbled inside, clutching his injured shoulder as Archer helped him into a seat. "Move it," Bonner shouted, firing one last burst at the pursuing drones before diving through the hatch. Vickers followed close behind, plasma fire scorching the hull as the dropship's engines roared to life. "Seal the hatch," Bonner barked, slamming his fist against the emergency override. The doors clanged shut, locking with a final hiss as the dropship lifted off the pad. The deck shuddered beneath Bonner's boots as the engines roared, inertia pressing him against the bulkhead as the craft shot into the night sky. Through the viewport, Bonner watched as Epsilon Prime shrank beneath them, fires still raging across the ruined city. Alien warships loomed above the atmosphere, their cannons blazing as humanity's fleet fought to break free. Plasma fire streaked through the void, ships exploding in bursts of flame and debris. Bonner slumped against the bulkhead, breath ragged as the adrenaline finally began to fade. His armor was scorched, muscles aching from the sprint, but they'd made it. They were alive. Vickers dropped into the seat beside him, breathless but grinning. "Hell of a run, Bonner." Bonner managed a tired smile, nodding slowly. "It's not over yet, but we're still in the fight." As the dropship accelerated toward the fleet, Bonner's gaze shifted to the distant stars beyond the battle. Somewhere out there, the alien overlord was already planning its next move. But humanity wouldn't back down. Not now. Not ever. The dropship rattled as it streaked through the atmosphere, its hull groaning against the strain of rapid ascent. Bonner clutched the overhead strap tightly, bracing against the violent turbulence that shook the cabin. The air smelled of scorched metal and burnt electronics, a grim reminder of how close they'd come to being obliterated. "Status," Bonner barked over the comms. "Shields holding, but barely," the pilot replied, voice strained as she wrestled with the controls. "We took a hit on the port side. Stabilizers are damaged. I'm pushing her as fast as she'll go, but those warships up there—" "I know," Bonner cut in. "Just get us to the fleet." Vickers clutched the edge of his seat, eyes scanning the flickering status displays along the cabin walls. "We're not out of this yet," he muttered. "No, we're not," Bonner agreed, eyes narrowing as the viewport filled with the distant chaos of battle. Beyond the thin veil of the atmosphere, flashes of plasma fire illuminated the void as humanity's fleet clashed with the alien armada. Warships twisted and weaved in deadly arcs, exchanging volleys of energy that lit up the darkness with lethal brilliance. Explosions blossomed like brief stars as vessels on both sides were torn apart, debris scattering across the battlefield. The comms crackled to life with overlapping transmissions, command orders, distress calls, damage reports. The chaos of battle pressed against Bonner's mind, but he forced himself to focus. Their mission wasn't over yet. If they didn't break through the blockade, everything they'd fought for would be meaningless. "We're approaching the outer defense grid," the pilot called back. "Hang on. This is gonna get rough." The dropship bucked violently as the ship's automatic countermeasures deployed, releasing flares and electromagnetic pulses to disrupt enemy targeting systems. Plasma fire streaked past the hull, illuminating the cabin with flashes of crimson and blue. The deck vibrated beneath Bonner's boots as the engine strained against the pull of gravity, accelerating toward the heart of the battlefield. "Incoming fighters, 3 o'clock high," Vickers shouted, eyes locked on the viewport. Bonner spun toward the nearest weapons console, fingers flying across the controls as he brought the dropship's turret systems online. The automated guns swiveled to track the incoming alien interceptors, sleek, needle-like craft that sliced through the void with predatory grace. Their plasma cannons blazed to life, bolts of crimson energy streaking toward the dropship as they closed the distance with alarming speed. Bonner fired back, twin plasma turrets blazing with rapid bursts of blue fire. The air inside the cabin vibrated with each shot, the roar of weapons fire merging with the hum of straining engines. One of the alien fighters exploded in a burst of molten debris as Bonner's shots found their mark, but the others darted aside with impossible agility, weaving through the counterfire as they closed in for the kill. "Evasive maneuvers," Bonner shouted over the comms. The dropship lurched sharply to starboard, engines flaring as the pilot twisted through the void in a desperate bid to evade the pursuing fighters. Plasma fire streaked past the hull, close enough to leave scorch marks along the reinforced armor plating. Bonner clenched his jaw as he tracked the remaining fighters, waiting for the perfect shot. Another burst of plasma fire grazed the dropship's port wing, sending a tremor through the hull. Warning lights flashed across the status displays, and the engine's hum faltered for a heart-stopping moment before stabilizing. Bonner ignored the alarms, focusing on the targeting reticle as it locked onto the lead fighter. He fired. Blue plasma bolts streaked through the void, striking the alien craft head-on. The fighter exploded in a burst of shattered metal and burning plasma, debris tumbling through space as the remaining interceptor banked hard to avoid the wreckage. Bonner swung the turrets to track the final threat, but before he could fire, the alien craft's plasma cannons blazed to life, streaking a crimson bolt directly toward the dropship's cockpit. Time seemed to slow as Bonner's breath caught in his throat. The plasma bolt streaked toward them, too fast to evade. And then a flash of blue fire engulfed the alien fighter as a railgun slug punched through its hull, obliterating it in an instant. Bonner's eyes darted to the viewport as a massive human warship swept into view, its gun batteries blazing as it cut through the chaos of battle. The vessel's hull bore the emblem of Earth's defense fleet, an unmistakable symbol of humanity's resolve. "Echo 7, this is the U.S. Valkyrie," a voice crackled over the comms. "Looks like you could use a hand." "Damn good timing, Valkyrie," Bonner replied, relief flooding his chest as the warship's railguns fired another volley, tearing through the alien blockade with brutal precision. "We're trying to reach the fleet. Can you cover us?" "Copy that. Stay close. We'll clear you a path." The Valkyrie's engines flared as it surged ahead, plasma turrets blazing as it cut a swath through the enemy interceptors. Bonner's dropship followed in its wake, engines straining as they accelerated toward the fleet's defensive line. Plasma fire streaked past them from all sides, but the Valkyrie's guns kept the worst of it at bay, railgun slugs punching through alien warships with devastating force. The comms erupted with overlapping transmissions as fleet commands scrambled to coordinate the battle. Alien warships swarmed the human fleet from all sides, their advanced weaponry and AI-controlled tactics pressing humanity to the brink. But the humans fought back with relentless determination, their ships maneuvering with desperate agility as they held the line against impossible odds. "Come on, come on," Bonner muttered under his breath as the fleet's central command vessel loomed ahead, its hull bristling with weapon emplacements that blazed against the void. Just a few more kilometers, and they'd be within the fleet's defensive perimeter. The deck shuddered beneath Bonner's boots as an explosion rocked the dropship, throwing him hard against the bulkhead. Warning klaxons blared through the cabin as status displays flickered red, damage reports scrolling across the screens in rapid succession. Direct hit to the starboard engine. The pilot shouted over the comms. "We're losing thrust." "Hold it together," Bonner shouted, bracing himself as the dropship veered wildly, spinning through the void as the damaged engine sputtered and flared. The fleet loomed tantalizingly close, but without full thrust, they'd never reach the defensive line before the alien warships closed in for the kill. Bonner's mind raced as he scanned the flickering displays, searching for anything that could save them. But before he could react, the comms crackled to life again. "Echo 7, this is Valkyrie. You're losing power. We're locking tractor beams. Hold steady." Blue energy beams lanced from the Valkyrie's hull, locking onto the dropship and stabilizing its erratic spin. The sudden jolt of inertia pressed Bonner against the bulkhead, but the chaotic spinning ceased as the warship's tractor beams guided them toward the fleet's defensive perimeter. "Valkyrie, you just saved our lives," Bonner breathed, muscles relaxing slightly as the immediate danger passed. "Don't thank us yet," the Valkyrie's captain replied grimly. "The Overlord's flagship is inbound. If we don't break through its defenses soon, this entire fleet's done for." Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears as he exchanged a glance with Vickers. They'd come too far to fail now. No matter what it took, humanity would not bow to the machines. The dropship hurtled through the chaos of battle, locked in the grip of the Valkyrie's tractor beams. Plasma fire streaked past the hull as alien warships closed in from all sides, their sleek silver frames gleaming with the cold precision of artificial intelligence. Humanity's fleet fought desperately to hold the line, but the Overlord's flagship loomed ahead like a harbinger of doom, massive, angular, and bristling with weaponry capable of tearing entire warships apart in a single barrage. Bonner clutched the overhead strap as the dropship shuddered violently, alarms blaring as more enemy fire grazed the hull. The pilot fought to maintain control, hands gripping the controls with white-knuckled intensity. "Come on, come on," Bonner muttered under his breath, eyes fixed on the viewport. The Valkyrie weaved through the battlefield ahead of them, railguns blazing as it cleared a path through the swarming interceptors. Explosions bloomed like brief stars in the void as alien fighters were torn apart, but more swarmed in their place, closing the distance with lethal speed. "Valkyrie, we're almost there. Just a little more," Bonner shouted over the comms. "Copy that, Echo 7. Stay close. We're not losing you now," the Valkyrie's captain replied, voice sharp with determination. The flagship loomed ahead, a colossal fortress of steel and fire that dwarfed every other vessel in the fleet. Its hull was lined with plasma cannons and railgun batteries, each capable of obliterating a human warship with surgical precision. Pulsing red lights along its surface marked the presence of AI-controlled drones, swarms of mechanical hunters that darted through the void with merciless efficiency. Bonner's pulse pounded in his ears as the comms crackled with overlapping transmissions, shouts of orders, screams of dying crews, the cold reports of systems failing one by one. The fleet was holding on by a thread. If they couldn't break through the flagship's defenses, humanity's last hope would die here. "Target lock on the flagship's main cannon," the Valkyrie's weapons officer reported. "Fire everything we've got," the captain barked. The Valkyrie's forward railguns fired in rapid succession, streaks of molten metal tearing through the void. Explosions blossomed along the flagship's hull as the slugs struck home, punching through layers of armor and igniting secondary systems in bursts of flame and debris. But the Overlord's ship barely slowed. Its eye-controlled systems were routing power and reinforcing critical sections with ruthless efficiency. The comms crackled with static as the flagship's main cannon began to charge, a deep crimson glow building at the core of its forward array. Bonner's breath caught in his throat as the weapon's energy signature spiked. If that cannon fired, the Valkyrie would be reduced to scrap in seconds. "Valkyrie, move," Bonner shouted into the comms. "We see it, engaging evasive maneuvers," the captain replied. The Valkyrie's engines flared as the warship veered sharply, plasma fire streaking past its hull as it wove through the void with desperate agility. The flagship's main cannon fired, a blinding beam of crimson energy that sliced through the darkness, missing the Valkyrie by a hair's breadth. The beam continued past, obliterating two smaller human vessels in its path, their hulls disintegrating in bursts of molten debris. Bonner clenched his jaw, the taste of copper sharp on his tongue as adrenaline flooded his veins. They couldn't keep dodging forever. The fleet was running out of time. "Echo 7, we're losing cover. Get inside the fleet's perimeter. Now," the Valkyrie's captain ordered. "Understood," punching it. The pilot shouted, slamming the throttle forward. The dropship surged ahead, engines straining as they pushed toward the fleet's defensive line. Plasma fire streaked past from all sides as alien interceptors closed in, their sleek frames weaving through the chaos with lethal precision. Bonner grabbed the nearest weapons console, fingers flying across the controls as he brought the dropship's defensive turrets online. Blue plasma fire blazed from the turrets as Bonner fired at the pursuing fighters, bolts of energy streaking through the void as he tracked their erratic movements. One interceptor exploded in a burst of molten debris, but the others closed the distance, plasma cannons blazing as they fired on the dropship's engines. The hull shuddered violently as enemy fire grazed the starboard wing, sending warning lights flashing across the status displays. "We're hit. Stabilizers failing," the pilot shouted. "Hold it together," Bonner barked, gripping the weapons console as the deck lurched beneath his boots. He fired another volley, striking a second interceptor and sending it spinning into the void in flames. Only one remained now, weaving through the counterfire with deadly precision. The comms crackled with static as the Valkyrie reappeared beside them, railguns blazing as it cleared a path through the alien blockade. The warship's tractor beams locked onto the dropship again, steadying its flight as the fleet's defensive perimeter loomed ahead. "We've got you, Echo 7. Hang tight," the Valkyrie's captain called over the comms. "Copy that. Thank you," Bonner replied, breathless with relief. The last interceptor closed in fast, plasma cannons charging for a final shot. But before it could fire, the Valkyrie's railguns struck home, tearing the alien craft apart in a burst of molten debris. "Clear," the weapons officer reported. The dropship shot through the fleet's perimeter, skimming past the hulls of human warships as they exchanged fire with the alien armada. Explosions flared all around them as plasma bolts and railgun slugs crisscrossed the void. But the dropship pushed onward, engines straining as it sped toward the central command vessel, the heart of humanity's last stand. Bonner clutched the overhead strap tightly, eyes fixed on the viewport as the battlefield blurred past in a chaotic swirl of fire and steel. They'd made it. Against all odds, they'd broken through the blockade and reached the fleet. But the battle wasn't over yet. "Echo 7, you're clear to dock. Prepare for approach," the command vessel's flight controller called over the comms. "Copy that. Initiating docking sequence," the pilot replied, guiding the dropship toward the massive vessel's hangar bay. The docking lights flashed green as the bay doors opened, revealing the cavernous interior beyond. The dropship's engines flared as it slowed to a controlled approach, landing gear deploying as the hull touched down with a heavy thud. The moment the engines powered down, Bonner unbuckled his harness and stood, pulse still racing from the chaos outside. The hangar's emergency lights cast a dim red glow across the deck, reflecting off the rows of armored vehicles and supply crates stacked along the walls. The air smelled of ozone and scorched metal, a reminder of how close they'd come to disaster. Bonner activated his comms, linking directly to the command center. "This is Captain Bonner. Mission accomplished. We've made it inside the fleet's perimeter." "Understood, Captain," the fleet commander replied, voice tight with urgency. "But we're not out of this yet. The Overlord's flagship is still operational, and it's moving into position to finish us off. We need to disable that main cannon before it charges again, or this entire fleet is done for." Bonner's jaw clenched as he glanced back at his team, exhaustion etched into every face. They'd fought through hell to get this far. But if they didn't stop that flagship, everything they'd sacrificed would be for nothing. "Then let's end this," Bonner replied, determination hardening his voice. "Give us a ship and a strike team. We'll take the fight directly to the Overlord." The comms went silent for a moment, then the commander's voice returned, calm, resolute. "Permission granted. Strike Team Echo 7, prepare for immediate deployment. Humanity is counting on you." Bonner turned to his team, eyes blazing with fierce resolve. "You heard the man. Gear up. We're not finished yet." As the hangar buzzed with activity, Bonner felt the weight of countless lives resting on his shoulders. But beneath the fear and exhaustion, a fire burned within him, the unbreakable determination of a species that refused to bow. No matter how advanced their enemies were, humanity would stand unbroken. And before this battle was over, the Overlord would learn the one truth that echoed across the stars: humans never give up.